The Ghost Bride of Blackwood Manor. Good evening, learners, and welcome to another captivating journey through Victorian England's most mysterious tales. I am your narrator, and tonight's story will transport you to the Gothic grandeur of Blackwood Manor, where love's eternal promise has become a haunting curse that spans generations. Before we begin, let's unlock today's vocabulary treasure chest. Listen carefully for these sophisticated words that will enhance your English mastery. Predecessor, someone who came before; auspicious, favorable, or promising; taciturn, habitually silent; spectral, ghostly; and concatenation, a series of connected events. Settle in with your evening tea, adjust your reading light, and prepare yourself for a tale that will chill your blood and warm your heart. The story of Catherine Blackwood, the ghost bride whose otherworldly presence still wanders the corridors of her ancestral home. Picture, if you will, the autumnal landscape of Yorkshire, England, in the year 1894. The rolling hills are adorned with the golden hues of changing leaves, while cobblestone villages nestle in valleys like sleeping giants. Here, perched majestically on a cliff overlooking the misty moors, stands Blackwood Manor, a monument to Victorian opulence and architectural magnificence. This Gothic revival structure, with its towering spires and intricate stonework, was commissioned in 1687 by the eccentric Sir Reginald Blackwood after he inherited a considerable fortune from his predecessor, a mysterious uncle who had amassed his wealth through overseas ventures of dubious reputation. The manor's current master, Lord Edmund Blackwood, is a stoic gentleman of 35 years, whose austere features and reticent nature have earned him the somber nickname, the Silent Duke, among the local villagers. His sallow complexion and piercing gray eyes seem to hide secrets as deep as the manor's ancient foundations. However, it is not the imposing architecture or its reclusive master that causes local townspeople to cross themselves when passing by on foggy evenings. It is the spectral presence of Lady Catherine Blackwood, Edmund's departed wife, whose otherworldly manifestations have been documented by servants, neighbors, and passing strangers for the consecutive years since her untimely demise. Now, let me introduce you to the fascinating Catherine Blackwood, and understanding her story is crucial to comprehending the tragic concatenation of events that followed. Catherine was 23 when she united with Edmund in holy matrimony, a radiant bride whose ethereal beauty was said to rival the oil portraits adorning the manor's grand ancestral gallery. Catherine possessed a vibrant personality that stood in stark contrast to Edmund's melancholic disposition. Where he was taciturn, she was eloquent; where he was somber, she was cheerful; where he was withdrawn, she was sociable. This fascinating dynamic created a complex relationship that was the subject of considerable speculation among the local gentry. Their courtship was brief but intense, lasting only 6 months from their initial meeting at the Harvest Festival to their auspicious wedding day in May 1892. Catherine's father, Mr. Aldrich Wellington, a prosperous merchant from London's financial district, had strategically arranged the matrimonial alliance to secure his daughter's social positioning in the countryside aristocracy, while Edmund had consented primarily to continue the distinguished bloodline and maintain the family honor and tradition. The wedding ceremony was magnificent beyond description, with over 200 distinguished guests assembled in the manor's great hall. Catherine wore a satin gown that glimmered like moonlight on water, her silk veil trailing gracefully behind her like morning mist over a peaceful lake. Every detail was absolutely perfect, until that fateful moment when Catherine solemnly promised to love, honor, and obey her new husband. Hidden within these traditional wedding vows were private words that only Catherine and Edmund truly understood, a secret code they had developed during their clandestine meetings in the manor's moonlit gardens, whispering promises of eternal devotion and shared dreams. But the wedding night would forever change the destiny of Blackwood Manor. As the celebrations died down and the final guests departed, Catherine began to experience unexplainable sensations: sudden drops in temperature, whispered voices from empty corridors, and flickering candles that danced without any visible breeze. The spectral phenomena began subtly but escalated rapidly. Unexplained cold spots appeared in the exact locations where Catherine had stood during the wedding ceremony. Ghostly conversations were heard in empty hallways, and candlelight flickered mysteriously despite the absence of any natural wind. The household staff, accustomed to the manor's various quirks and old house eccentricities, initially dismissed these supernatural occurrences as minor inconveniences or overactive imaginations. Mrs. Pemberton, the long-serving housekeeper, reassured the newlyweds that old homes have old ways, and we must respect their customs and traditions. However, as the weeks progressed, the paranormal activity became increasingly disturbing and difficult to ignore. Catherine herself began experiencing bizarre visions. She would perceive faceless figures gliding through the manor's corridors, hear children's laughter when no children were present in the mansion, and feel an overwhelming sense of unease that clung to her like evening mist to a silent lake. Edmund, ever the skeptical Victorian gentleman, attributed these disturbing reports to Catherine's sensitive nature and the emotional strain of adapting to her new married life. His deep, measured voice would offer little comfort as he assured her, "It is merely adjustment anxiety, my dear. You are still becoming familiar with the manor's eccentricities and family traditions." Nevertheless, Catherine possessed an intuitive understanding that these experiences were genuine supernatural manifestations. She could feel the compelling presence of someone who had inhabited these. Nevertheless, Catherine possessed an intuitive understanding that these experiences were genuine supernatural manifestations. She could feel the compelling presence of someone who had inhabited these rooms before her, someone who refused to relinquish their claim to Blackwood Manor. One particularly stormy October evening, exactly 5 months after her wedding day, Catherine made a discovery that would unravel the dark threads of Edmund's carefully woven deception. While exploring the manor's extensive library, a sanctuary she had claimed as her personal refuge, she noticed a curious draft emanating from behind a towering mahogany bookshelf. With trembling fingers, Catherine pulled away several leather-bound volumes, revealing a concealed door that creaked open to expose a narrow, dust-laden staircase ascending into the manor's forbidden west tower. This section of the house had been explicitly prohibited to her by Edmund, who had claimed the structural integrity was compromised and therefore dangerous. But Catherine's curiosity, that innate human compulsion to understand the inexplicable, propelled her upward despite the warning bells resonating in her mind. Each wooden step groaned beneath her weight, as if protesting her intrusion into secrets long buried. At the summit, she discovered a locked door. The key, remarkably, hung on a rusty nail beside the frame, an invitation or perhaps a test. The lock resisted momentarily before surrendering with a metallic click that echoed through the confined space. What Catherine witnessed beyond that threshold would haunt her remaining days. The circular chamber was immaculately preserved, as though time itself had been suspended within its walls. A wedding dress, identical to Catherine's own, hung on a wooden mannequin, the fabric pristine despite obvious age. Beside it stood a vanity table displaying an array of personal items, a silver hairbrush, jewelry boxes, perfume bottles, and most disturbingly, a portrait. The painting depicted a young woman of extraordinary beauty, her features bearing an uncanny resemblance to Catherine herself. The same auburn hair, the same emerald eyes, even the same delicate bone structure. Beneath the gilded frame, a tarnished brass plate bore an inscription, "Lady Isabella Blackwood, beloved wife, 1887–1892. Catherine's blood ran cold. Edmund had been married before, to a woman who looked remarkably like her, a woman who had died the very year Catherine had married Edmund. Her hands shaking, Catherine began examining the room more thoroughly. She discovered a leather journal hidden beneath the mattress of a small bed, Isabella's diary. With mounting horror, Catherine read the final entries. October 15, 1891. Edmund grows increasingly possessive. He forbids me from leaving the manor, claiming the world outside is too dangerous for someone of my delicate constitution. I feel more prisoner than wife. December 3, 1891. He watches me constantly. Sometimes I catch him staring as though memorizing every detail of my appearance. When I question his behavior, he becomes distant, retreating to his studies for days at a time. March 2, 1892. I attempted to leave yesterday. Edmund discovered me at the gates and dragged me back. He locked me in this tower room, saying it was for my own protection. I can hear him pacing below, muttering about preserving perfection and eternal devotion. May 8, 1892. I am ill. Edmund brings my meals, but the food tastes peculiar, bitter, metallic. My strength wanes daily. I suspect. The entry ended abruptly, the pen trailing off the page as though Isabella's hand had fallen away mid-sentence. Catherine's chest tightened with terror. She frantically flipped through the remaining pages, finding only one final entry in a different masculine hand, Edmund's handwriting. May 10, 1892. My beloved Isabella has departed this mortal realm. Her beauty, however, shall never fade from memory. I have made arrangements to preserve her essence. Soon I shall find her again, reborn in another form. Love is eternal, and so too shall be my devotion. A floorboard creaked behind Catherine. She spun around to find Edmund standing in the doorway, his gray eyes reflecting no surprise, only a disturbing calm that chilled her to the bone. "I see you've discovered my sanctuary," he said softly, his voice devoid of emotion. "I had hoped you would remain content with the illusion a bit longer." "Who was Isabella?" Catherine demanded, her voice trembling despite her effort to sound brave. "What did you do to her?" Edmund stepped into the room, closing the door behind him with deliberate slowness. "Isabella was my first attempt at capturing perfection, but she was flawed, too willful, too curious, much like yourself. She didn't understand that true love requires sacrifice, requires submission to something greater than oneself." He moved toward the wedding dress, running his fingers along the fabric with disturbing tenderness. "When I saw you at the harvest festival, Catherine, I knew immediately. You possessed Isabella's essence, her beauty, her grace, her very soul reincarnated. You were meant to complete what she could not." "You're mad," Catherine whispered, backing toward the window. "Mad?" Edmund's laugh was hollow, echoing off the stone walls. "No, my dear, I am devoted. Do you know how rare it is to find perfection in this imperfect world? When I discovered Isabella dying from the unfortunate complications of her illness," his emphasis on the word made Catherine's stomach turn, "I vowed to find her again. And I did. I found her in you." Catherine's mind raced. The spectral phenomena, the cold spots, the whispered voices, they had never been Isabella's ghost. They had been warnings. Perhaps from Isabella herself, trying to save her successor from the same fate. "The visions I've been experiencing," Catherine said slowly, comprehension dawning. "You've been poisoning me, haven't you? Just as you poisoned Isabella." Edmund's expression transformed into something approximating pride. "You're more perceptive than she was. Yes, small doses in your evening tea, nothing too aggressive. Just enough to weaken you gradually, to make you dependent on my care, to keep you here where you belong. Eventually, you'll become too weak to resist, and then you'll truly be mine forever. Preserved. Perfect. Eternal." The room seemed to tilt around Catherine. All the pieces aligned with horrifying clarity. Edmund's insistence she drink her specially prepared tea each evening, her increasing fatigue, the dizzy spells she had attributed to the manor's overwhelming atmosphere. But as Edmund advanced toward her, something extraordinary occurred. The temperature in the room plummeted so drastically that their breath became visible clouds. The candles extinguished simultaneously, plunging them into darkness illuminated only by moonlight streaming through the tower window. And then Catherine saw her, Isabella, or rather Isabella's spectral form, materializing between Catherine and Edmund. The ghost's translucent figure glowed with ethereal luminescence, her face contorted in fury and determination. "Isabella," Edmund gasped, genuine shock breaking through his cold composure for the first time. "Impossible, you're dead, you're gone." The spectre spoke, her voice like wind through autumn leaves. "You cannot keep us, Edmund, you never could. Catherine deserves the truth, and she deserves to live." The ghost turned to Catherine, and in those translucent eyes, Catherine saw not malevolence but compassion, the understanding of one victim trying to save another. "Run," Isabella's spirit commanded. "He's kept me bound here through his obsession, trapped in these walls. But you can still escape. Run and bring help. Expose what he's done." Edmund lunged toward Catherine, but Isabella's form expanded, creating a barrier of spectral energy that threw him backward against the wall. "Now!" the ghost shrieked. Catherine didn't hesitate. She bolted through the door and down the staircase, her heart thundering in her chest. Behind her, she heard Edmund's enraged bellowing and the supernatural sounds of Isabella's spirit holding him at bay. She raced through the manor's corridors, past the startled servants who had begun to gather at the commotion. Mrs. Pemberton reached out to stop her, but Catherine pushed past, gasping, "Fetch the constable. Lord Blackwood is a murderer." Catherine burst through the manor's main entrance into the cold night air, running down the gravel path toward the village lights twinkling in the valley below. Her lungs burned, her legs ached, but she didn't stop until she reached the village constable's residence, pounding on the door with desperate fists. When the authorities finally arrived at Blackwood Manor hours later, they discovered Edmund in the tower room, unconscious. The investigation that followed uncovered the horrifying truth. Isabella had indeed been slowly poisoned with arsenic over several months. Her body, which Edmund had claimed was cremated, was found preserved in a sealed chamber beneath the manor, her wedding dress still intact, her features maintained through Edmund's disturbing embalming experiments. Further investigation revealed Edmund's predecessor, that mysterious uncle, had exhibited similar obsessive behaviors, having been institutionalized for attempting to preserve his deceased wife through unnatural means. The madness, it seemed, ran deep in the Blackwood bloodline. Edmund was arrested, tried, and committed to Broadmoor Criminal Lunatic Asylum, where he spent his remaining years sketching portraits of Isabella and Catherine, muttering about eternal love and perfect preservation. Catherine survived, though she never fully recovered from the psychological trauma. She testified at Edmund's trial, her voice steady despite the horror of recounting her experience. The manor was sealed by court order, its dark secrets finally exposed to the cleansing light of justice. But here, dear listeners, is where our story takes its final, unexpected turn, the twist that transforms everything you thought you understood. 20 years later, in 1914, Catherine Wellington Blackwood, now Catherine Ashford after remarrying a kind physician from London, returned to Yorkshire. She had been summoned by the estate solicitor regarding the manor's demolition and the dispersal of remaining Blackwood assets. As Catherine stood before the condemned building one final time, an elderly woman approached her. The stranger's face was weathered with age, but her eyes held a familiar intensity. "Lady Catherine," the woman said softly, "I was Edmund's childhood nurse. I must speak with you before I pass on, for I cannot take this secret to my grave." Catherine felt a chill of premonition. "What secret?" The old nurse's hands trembled as she reached into her bag, producing a faded photograph. "This is Edmund's mother, Lady Margaret Blackwood, at age 23. Catherine gasped. The woman in the photograph was nearly identical to both herself and Isabella. The same features, the same expression, the same haunting beauty. "Edmund's father," the nurse continued, her voice heavy with sorrow, "was just like his son, obsessed with preserving beauty, with capturing perfection. Lady Margaret died under mysterious circumstances when Edmund was only 5 years old. His father was committed to an asylum, where he died raving about finding his wife reborn." The nurse's next words struck Catherine like a physical blow. Edmund wasn't searching for Isabella, Lady Catherine. He was searching for his mother. He was trying to recapture the only love he had ever known, the love stolen from him as a child. Both you and Isabella resembled Lady Margaret. That's why he chose you. You were never yourselves to him. You were her, the woman he lost before he could even understand what loss meant. Catherine's world tilted. The ghost, the hauntings, the obsession, it had all stemmed from a traumatized child's inability to process grief, twisted over decades into something monstrous and deadly. "And there's one more thing," the nurse whispered, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "Isabella, the woman you believed saved you, she never existed." "What?" Catherine's voice barely rose above a whisper. "There was no first wife. Edmund created Isabella's identity, her diary, her portrait, her entire existence. He fabricated the ghost story, planted the evidence in the tower room, orchestrated the supernatural phenomena using hidden mechanisms throughout the manor. It was all designed to test you, to see if you would remain devoted even when confronted with horror. He wanted to see if you would stay despite discovering his supposed dark past. He wanted proof of unconditional love, the kind a mother gives a child." The nurse handed Catherine a leather-bound journal, Edmund's true diary, kept hidden all these years. "The ghost you saw that night, the spirit that saved you, that was your own mind's creation, born from desperation and the power of suggestion. The arsenic had already begun affecting your perceptions. You saved yourself, Lady Catherine. Your will to survive created the ghost you needed to escape." Catherine stood frozen, the journal trembling in her hands. Everything she had believed for 20 years, the martyred first wife, the vengeful ghost, the supernatural salvation, had been elaborate fiction. She had escaped not through spectral intervention but through her own courage and determination. The manor loomed behind her, its windows dark and empty. For a moment, Catherine could have sworn she saw a figure in the tower window, not Isabella, for Isabella had never been, but perhaps the echo of her own younger self, the woman who had fought her way out of darkness and survived to tell the tale. As Catherine walked away from Blackwood Manor for the final time, she realized the most terrifying truth of all. The real ghost that had haunted those halls was not supernatural at all. It was the ghost of a little boy's broken heart, grown monstrous with time and madness, forever seeking the impossible, to resurrect the dead through the bodies of the living. The manor was demolished the following month. No trace remains except for local legends that speak of the ghost bride of Blackwood Manor, stories that grow more embellished with each telling, stories that miss the truth entirely. For the real horror of Blackwood Manor was never the supernatural. It was the very human capacity for love to become so twisted, so obsessive, so broken, that it transforms into its opposite, into a prison, into poison, into death itself. Thank you, dear listeners, for joining me on this journey through the shadows of Victorian England. Remember, the most frightening monsters are not those that go bump in the night, but those that reside in the human heart disguised as love. This concludes tonight's tale. Sleep well if you can.